a normal man will be tempted by a woman, and any man that a woman does not tempt needs deliverance. If I see a naked woman, I'll be tempted because I'm drawn, because I'm a normal man. It's only an abnormal man that will be tempted by another man. God never created death. God never created Satan. Even if I see a naked man, I won't be tempted. But if I see a naked woman, I'll be tempted. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil grew out of the ground. Moses was using a parable to communicate spiritual realities. That's why believers don't die, believers sleep. Moses preached two messages: law, Christ, choose. Many things we blame Satan for, Satan is waiting to report you on the judgment day. Temptation is not a sin. You know that in Genesis chapter 2 verse 16, put it up. Genesis chapter 2 verse number 16. And the Lord God commanded the man, saying, of every tree of the garden thou mayest freely eat. Next verse. But of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil thou shalt not eat of it. For in the day that thou eatest thereof, thou shalt surely die. The day you eat, you shall surely die. Did you observe God's statement? He didn't say, the day you eat, I will kill you. So the statement was not a reaction. The statement was a love information. The day you eat of it, you shall surely die. I will not be the one to kill you. That's very important. The day you eat, you shall surely die. He didn't say the day you eat, I will kill you. Please, that's very instructive. You shall surely die, which means that statement is the love of God in action. So how does Brother Paul explain that statement? Romans chapter 5 verse 12. Wherefore, as by one man sin entered into the world, and death by sin. Did he say death by God? Death by who? Death by sin, not by God. And so death passed upon all men, for that all have sinned. So what was God revealing to Adam when he says the day you eat you shall die? God was revealing sin to Adam. God was revealing sin to Adam. That wasn't a reaction, because nothing had happened. It was not a reaction. Remember, there was no death in existence when God created the universe. There was no death. God never created death. God never brought death. Death was not God's invention. Why? Because all that God created is plainly stated in Genesis chapter 1. And at the end of chapter 1, look at the summary of all of God's creation. Genesis chapter 1 verse 31. And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, help me, it was. And the evening and the morning were the sixth day. So everything God created was very good, meaning God never created death, meaning God never created Satan. Everything God created was very good. So if everything God created was very good, it means God did not create the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So where did the tree of the knowledge of good and evil come from? It grew up from the ground. God finished creation in chapter 1. 31, everything was good. Chapter 2 verse 1, God rested. Then in chapter 2, we see the tree of the knowledge of good and evil growing. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil was not in Genesis 1. It wasn't God who created it. God created trees and herbs and told man to eat they have for his body. But then in chapter 2, we see a tree growing that did not exist in chapter 1. Now, remember, the book of Genesis was Moses' teaching notes. And when a teacher is teaching for the purpose of the understanding of his audience, he could use analogies and parables. There was no tree of the knowledge of good and evil in chapter 2, but there was a tree of the knowledge of good and evil in chapter 2. Please put on your thinking caps. Moses was teaching, so he uses parables. A parable has a fact, a fiction, and a little lesson. Out of the ground, not from God. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil grew out of the ground. So if Moses was using a parable in Genesis, what is the ground? The heart of man. What is the tree of the knowledge of good and evil? Evil thoughts. Moses was using a parable, parabole, the Greek word, to communicate spiritual realities. Are you here? So the tree of the knowledge of good and evil were thoughts that grew out of a man. How do we know that? Brother Paul, wherefore as by one man sin entered into the world, and death by sin. So man is the architect of sin and the architect of death. God never created death. That is why death is an enemy of God. The last enemy that shall be destroyed is death. I'm teaching here. So when you see people dying, it's not God in operation. It is God's enemy. That's why believers don't die. Believers sleep. Death is by force. Sleep is by choice. Nobody sleeps by force. If you force me to sleep, I will cover the blanket and close my eye, but I'm still awake. I only sleep when I decide to sleep. Jesus said, when you receive him, you pass from death to life. The law of the Spirit of life in Christ Jesus has set me free from the law of sin and death. So believers don't die. Believers sleep. Unbelievers die. Am I teaching? Now follow me, stay with me, because I want to deal with this wrath of God thing very seriously. In James chapter 1 verse 13, Brother James gives credibility to what Brother Paul has said. He says, let no man say when he's tempted, I'm tempted of God. For God cannot be tempted with evil, neither tempted he any man. But every man is tempted when he is drawn away of his own lust. His own. Wherefore, as by one man sin from man, sin entered into the world, and the sin that came out of man produced death. Every man is tempted when he's drawn away of his own lust. James 1:14. When he's drawn away of his own lust and enticed. Watch the motions of sin. Next verse. And when lust had conceived, when lust has conceived, it bringeth forth sin. And sin, when it is finished, bringeth forth death. So did you see the motion of sin? God is not involved. Satan is not involved. In the motion of sin, God is not involved. Satan is not involved. That's how small Satan is. That's how powerful man is. Man has lust. What is lust? Desires. Anybody that has desires is temptable. The only people that don't get tempted are those that don't have desires. I get tempted, your pastor gets tempted, because we are men with desires. You too get tempted, including those of you pretend. You are tempted just like you are pretending. No human being is temptless. It is English like that. Every man is tempted. How many men? Are you a man? When he's drawn away of his own. So every man has a lust. Lust is desire. Satan cannot tempt you except in the area of your desire. Where you don't have desire, you cannot be tempted. For example, me, even if I see a naked man, I won't be tempted. I'll just say, dress up, dress up, dress up. What's the problem with you? That's all. I won't even think about it. Okay? But if I see a naked woman, I'll be tempted. Because I'm drawn. Even if I see a naked man, I won't be tempted. I'll just say, dress up, dress up, dress up. What's the problem with you? That's all. I won't even think about it. Okay? But if I see a naked woman, I'll be tempted. Because I'm drawn. Because I'm a normal man. It's only an abnormal man that will be tempted by another man. A normal man will be tempted by a woman. And any man that a woman does not tempt needs deliverance. Especially a beautiful woman. You know, it's only me that can tell you this kind of thing, right? Every man is tempted. Are you a man? Yes. Temptation is not a sin. Temptation is not a sin. Jesus was tempted, but he was without sin. So temptation is not a sin. Every man is tempted when he's drawn away of his own lust. So when I am tempted and I dwell on it and I stay on it, it will give birth to a child called sin. But if I'm tempted and I don't stay on it and I move away from it, it will not produce a child called sin. So therefore it cannot produce death. If I see a beautiful woman, wow, wonderful, I take my eyes away and move on. I was tempted, but I did not allow it to draw me. When a woman sees a handsome man and she goes like, wow, and she takes her eyes off, she's tempted but did not yield. So the temptation did not draw her. So therefore it didn't have time to conceive, because before it conceived, he was distracted. I'm teaching here. Every man is tempted when he's drawn away of his own lust. Then when lust has conceived, so the lust must have time to conceive. When you now sit down and calculate, how am I going to carry it out? You calculate and plan and strategize. That's conception period. Then when you have strategized, it is when you execute the strategy that it is called sin. And once it produces sin, you can't stop the process. It is not God, it is not Satan. Because when you yielded to the temptation, you produce a child called sin. And sin can never be alone. It comes with death. It's not God that killed you. God didn't even know you were dying till his attention was called. You use your hand to trigger the action. You sat down, you meditated, you thought over it, you strategized, you planned, you even prayed for it to work. Then you took a step by faith and then you set the machinery in motion. Then when it is about to kill you, God now discovered and stepped in. So the only part that God plays in mercy is to interrupt the process. Somebody say, if God knows that Adam will have sinned, why did he create Adam? He created Adam because also within Adam he put in Adam the ability to decide to sin and the ability to decide not to sin, and gave Adam the freedom to make the choice. But listen carefully, everybody. You make the choice, but you don't determine the outcome of the choice. So you have a free will, but your will is not that free. You have a free will, but your will is not that free. It is free in the sense that you will make the choice, you will make the decision, but it is not free in the sense that you do not determine the outcome of that decision. The outcome is beyond your power, but the choice is within your power. So when thinking of the choice, go beyond the choice, think of the outcome, because the outcome can live with you for the rest of your life. It's not God. Every man is tempted when he is drawn. It's not Satan. Many things we blame Satan for, Satan is waiting to report you on the judgment day. So, even the one he decided he blamed God, is he fair? I'm teaching good. Give me a few minutes. Let me push this a little more. Now, so the Bible tells us that it is by the law you have the knowledge of sin. Look at Romans chapter 5 verse 13. Romans chapter 5 verse number 13. For until the law, sin was in the world, but sin is not imputed when there is no law. Until the law, sin was in the world, but nobody was held accountable and nobody was guilty. That's why Abraham could sleep with his house girl and stand up and still be happy, because it was normal in their culture for a man to have more than one wife. There was no law to define what is right and what is wrong. So everything was okay. Even though it was a sin, but there was no law. If there's no traffic light, you can speed freely. But the moment they introduce a traffic light and it is on red and you pass the same place, you have broken the law, you'll be arrested. Before you were passing, nobody stopped you, nobody arrested you. But now you are arrested because there's an introduction of traffic light, which is law. Until the law, sin was in the world, but sin is not credited to men's account where there is no law. So law defines sin. That's why Jesus will say something like this in John chapter 5 verse 45. Put it up for me. John chapter 5 verse 45. Are you getting blessed? John 5:45. Can we all read together very loud? Everybody want to go? Do not think that I will accuse you to the Father. There is one that accuseth you, even Moses, in whom you trust. How does Moses accuse you? Through the law. For the law was given by Moses. So the accuser of the brethren is not Satan. The accuser of the brethren is the law of Moses. The law of Moses is accusation. Then look at what Jesus will now say in that John chapter 5 verse 46. Let's read together, everybody. John 5:46. 1 to go. For had you believed Moses, you would have believed me. Why? For the way you're reading, you're not reading like you have some life inside you. Can I hear you read like you have some life in by else? I want to go. For had you believed Moses, you would have believed me. Why? For he wrote of me. You just say we trust Moses. That's why he's accusing us. Then now again you say we should believe Moses, for he wrote of you. Why does this sound like a contradiction? No, there's no contradiction. What Jesus is saying is that Moses in Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy wrote two things. He wrote two things. So Moses preached two messages. He preached the law which accuses, and he preached Christ who justifies. The choice is yours. Law, Christ, choose. That was Moses' message. So the job of the preacher today is, when he reads the book of Moses, he rightly divides the law from Christ. He trashes the law and feeds God's people Christ.